Hello, my name is Craig Haen. I am the co-chair of Community Outreach for the American Group Psychotherapy Association. One of the things we get asked a lot by group therapists who have ongoing groups in a community where there has been crisis or trauma is how they begin to manage that within their group. One of the things we learned in New York City after September 11th is that ongoing familiar communities were really important to people after a traumatic event that had disrupted their sense of safety. So they returned to their religious communities, their families, their neighborhoods, and indeed their ongoing psychotherapy groups. When there's been a disruption, we might think of our group therapy sessions as a haven or a shelter for folks. And to reestablish that haven or shelter, we want to return to some of the things that establish routine and predictability within the group. We might, regardless of what stage of group development they are in, consider what we did in the first few sessions to help them settle into being in the group and return to some of those things that created a sense of safety in the group to begin with. Right? What are our rhythms and routines in the group? How do we reestablish connection and relationship? How do we make space for people's feelings? And we know as groups develop, there's a greater complexity to them, right? Can we make room for a range of experiences and feelings around the traumatic event? Can we provide information to people? Can we ground them in the things that they share in the community of our groups? One of the things we want to do is to slow people down, right? Trauma has an effect on our systems. It gets us hyper-aroused, it gets us racing. So we want to help them to slow down. We want to help them to find their body in the space, in the room. We want to monitor for signs of dissociation in the group. Who's checking out, and how do we gently help them return to being here in the space with us? And finally, I think it's really important that we begin to think about what happens after they leave the group, right? We're with them for a short period of time. We can do a lot in that period of time, but how do we reconnect them to supports that already exist for them outside of the room? And if those supports are lacking, those family members, those safe people who their go-to person will be that night, that week, in between sessions. If those are lacking, how do we connect them to resources that they then can establish those supports for themselves? Finally, the last thing I would want to say to group therapists about working with clients after trauma is to remember that at the heart of trauma is isolation. So just by virtue of having a group, you're countering the isolation that is like fertilizer for the traumatic experience. And so even if you feel de-skilled because you've experienced the traumatic event, go back to what's familiar to you, the way we attune to people, the way we listen, and the way we help them ground themselves in the space with one another.